The purpose of setting a big goal in real estate isn't necessarily about hitting the goal. Yes, setting a goal is exciting. Yes, we all actually want to hit a goal we work towards. But if you make the goal the only benefit, oftentimes you end up quitting or fall way short. When you can find benefits in the pursuit of the goal, that's where you give yourself the best chance to hit the goal. Doesn't always happen in the timeline you want, but you also start to change as a person throughout the process. Let me explain. I wrote down 5 reasons in this video that the goal is the cherry on top. That it's actually not the most important part of goal setting. Yes, it's part of the process, but it's not where our focus should be. So if this is helpful, if you get anything out of it, give me a subscribe. That's how I know if videos like this are helpful or not, if I should create more content like this. So let's get right into it. The first thing I wrote down is it changes your behaviors. When you set a big goal, and I'm not talking about, a 10%, you set a goal that improves your production or improves something you're working on by 10%. You don't change behaviors that way. You just try to work a little harder and hit your that's not strategy, right? It's also not realistic because at some point, yes, that works early on in anything. When you're trying something new, you could work a little harder because it's new. There's more room for growth. But after you do anything for a little while and you become good at it, the room for growth is narrower. It is harder to grow, right? So you have to change strategy. Working harder isn't the answer. Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan, they wrote a great book, 10x is better than 2x, which talks about, it's a great book, first of all, pick it up and check it out. It talks about how making a giant 10x goal forces you to change your behaviors. The actions you're doing today can't get you that 10x result. And it's that force in behavior that is necessary to hit any big goal. So what it starts to do, if you make your goal big enough, and I'm not saying it has to be 10x, but it has to be something substantial. If you make your goal big enough in real estate, it will force you to start to look at the 20% of actions that you take in your day that give you 80% of your results. Because that's what you want to hold on to. You want to hold on to that 20% that's giving you 80% of your results. And then you want to take that other 80% of your time and you want to try and engage in new strategies with it that are going to get you to that giant goal that you want, change the behavior. So the first thing creating a big goal does is it forces you to focus on that 20%. It forces you to change your behaviors and your habits. Second thing that I wrote down, it gives you tasks to focus on that help you feel good about yourself, that are not tied to the result, right? Here's what I mean. There's been times in my career, especially early on, where I was so focused on the goal. And in real estate, anybody that's been doing real estate long enough knows this is an up and down business. No matter how good you are, deals are going to fall apart. No matter how good you are, people are going to tell you no. No matter how good you are, people are going to list their home with you and then change their mind a couple weeks later. Something happened in their life, right? No matter how good you are, things are going to happen in the world that cause people to pause and slow down, right? So if your happiness and your production is tied to that goal, it's very defeating and it is very hard to keep going. But if you can create daily action steps that you can control and that you can do each day, that are going to help you towards your goal long term, and you can accomplish those daily action steps, you can create wins for yourself. You can create things you can feel good about each day, whether you sell a house or not. And that's where the magic starts to happen, where you have a strategy and action steps that are aligned that will help you to your goal, but that you can focus on doing each day, that you can control. I know I can talk to X people today and it'll bring me my long-term goal. I know I can make X social media post this week or X YouTube post this week and it will get me to my goal. I know I can do X client check-ins, right? Everything is strategic and calculated, and all you have to do is just hit the checklist, right? You hit your checklist, that's something to feel good about each day, each week, regardless of how many sales you did, because you know the sales are coming when you can create an environment for yourself that looks like that. The third thing I wrote down, you get more enjoyment when you can control that accomplishment, right? If you're just being reactive each day and floating with the wins and the losses, your ups and downs are going to be huge, right? But when you control the action steps and you're intentional about it, right? Let's backtrack. We focus on the 20%. We keep that. We're using some new strategies through learning or through mentors or coaches or proven tracker. We're not guessing. We're using strategies that have worked. Then we can create some action steps off this. We're in control of those action steps. We're in control of our happiness. We can control what we're going to accomplish that day. We're not going to create a schedule for ourselves that sets us up for failure, where we have so many actions that we can't complete them in a day, so we're going to get discouraged. No, we're going to set up an action plan that we know we can hit each day. And we know when we hit all the action items, at the end of the day, we're going to go home feeling good because we did everything in our control in that day. So very similar to 2 and 3 are very similar, but the difference in 3 is we're creating some control in our steps by design, right? This is all what a big goal does. Without a big goal, we don't hit any of these points. We're just floating through the day. Yeah, we're going to try to do what we do. If we did what we did last year, it'll be nice. Or if we could do just a little better, work a little harder. There's nothing that will keep us on a track that way. We're just floating, right? Big goals create a track. They create a design. They create a plan. Very important. The fourth thing I wrote down is you start to change as a person as you continue down this path. So you're doing these daily actions, you're feeling good about yourself, you're only focusing on the actions, you're being unattached to the results, right? You've created this great daily work environment for yourself that is really the key to long-term success in real estate. You've detached from transactions and you're focused on the plan, right? And you start to change because now your daily habits are different. All because you made this big goal. It's created this trickle-down effect where now the way you attack your day and the activities you do each day are different because your goal's different. And because you're doing different activities each day, you start to become a different person, right? And you start to become the person you need to be to actually hit your goal. So sometimes, in real estate, we make these goals for the year, these great big goals, and we hit them. As the year goes, we start to become that person. We hit the goal. Everything's great. But number 5, the last thing I wrote down is, even if you don't hit the goal, even if you miss, 9 times out of 10, your miss with a big goal still has you substantially higher than where you were the year before. Now, I can personally attest to this. I don't think I've ever hit my goal in real estate. I always make this great big goal. I always work my butt off for it each year, try different strategies, follow some of these rules and processes I've shared. But at the end of the year, I usually don't hit it. But I am farther ahead than I was last year because I've started to put in new habits and make new changes and start to become a different person than I was the year before, right? And the fact of the matter is, if you wanted to hit a goal in a year and it takes you 2 or even 3 years, that's a win too. We all change and learn at different rates, and each goal is going to have a different time, and you don't know until you get into it, until you actually start doing the work, making the changes, showing the consistency, taking these daily action steps. You don't know how it's going to unfold. But if you can enjoy the process along the way, you're going to have a lot of fun doing it. And without putting that goal out there in the first place, you never start down this path and start to make some of these changes that you have to get to. There's no goal that's worthwhile that doesn't involve some of this process, and I would argue all of this process that we've talked about. I think a lot of agents don't make the big goal because they're afraid at the end of the year they won't hit it. And they're afraid they'll tell people their goal and they'll fall way short. And that matters. I get it. That matters. The more attached we are to those outside things, the more limiting it's going to be on our careers, and in our happiness and in our work. So if this video resonates and you'd like a little more information on like accountability, some ways you can set up accountability for yourself to stick to these goals, which would really be the next step. Once you have a plan like this, you want ways to hold you accountable. Of course, I'm happy to help with that on my end, but I'm also happy to just send you a video on accountability that you can do on your own, by yourself, that will help you stick with some of this stuff. And I'd love to hear what your goal is. If you have a great big goal, you want to drop it in the comments or message me, share it. I'd love to hear what your great big goal is and then hear how some of these steps work throughout the course of the year. Hope this helps.